All right, boom. Let's do this. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Money Talks. This is the opportunity for us to have a live conversation about what's happening in all things macro investing, the intersection of macro with cryptocurrencies, tokenization, and your chance to ask about anything you want to ask in terms of what's going on in the crypto world, trading, the Abra app, and anything else you want to talk about. So we've got a special guest I'm going to bring in a couple of minutes. So before we get there, I've got some pretty exciting news to share. So let's get to some news first. So let's see. First, we've got. Let me just bring up my trusty news here. So first, I've got some really exciting news to share on the Abra front. Abra raised $55 million in our latest round of financing. So congrats to the Abra team and all of our investors for that. We've got some really awesome new investors that joined the fray here, and we're going to be announcing some expansion plans, some new products. The team is growing like crazy. We're hiring in every area of the company. We had some great coverage from Fortune and from our friends at Bloomberg. I had an opportunity to go on CNBC, which we're going to talk to Dan about in a few minutes, where we talked about some of Ray Dalio's comments. And yeah, really exciting week. So one of the other things we talked about there was our Board Chairman Gensler's comments from the SEC. Apparently, there's still this growing narrative that half of what's out there on crypto exchanges are securities, but yet they refuse to tell us what those are. So I think we're going to see and hear a lot more of this narrative over the next few weeks and months, and we'll see how that plays out. Coinbase has put themselves kind of front and center in the crossfires here, and I don't know if that's going to turn out to be a distraction for them or something that will ultimately help the broader crypto space. China hasn't stopped the share for China. Well, actually, we'll leave it for a second. But China hasn't stopped their mining crackdown. They've actually hired and engaged more people on the ground to go into the provinces and try to shut down the last vestiges of any mining operations that are still going on. I don't know if you've heard, but this company Evergrand, which is, I believe, the largest real estate development company and one of the largest debtors in all of China, is on the brink of default. They've stopped interest yield payments throughout the country. This has led to protests, which is something you just don't see in China. And if Evergrande truly fails, it is going to be a big deal. It won't have the same global repercussions in terms of the global banking system, because not as many folks outside or companies outside of China have exposure, from what I understand. But the repercussions of a failing Chinese economy itself would be absolutely massive. And I think this is not being yet widely reported in the West, and people need to understand what's going on there. Okay, so big happenings in China right now, and I'm worried that the Chinese government is not going to be able to effectively, stop this failure, and the cascading effects of what it's going to mean could be significant for the global economy. So while we're on global macro, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about what's going on in El Salvador. As you know, about 10 days ago, Bitcoin became official tender in El Salvador. Yesterday, I read a fantastic article by Alex Gladstein from the Human Rights Foundation, basically giving a very good balanced view of what's really going on the ground and how all of this came to be in the first place, but also, not necessarily pulling the line on the president of El Salvador and expressing valid concerns about his movement towards a let's call it a dictatorial regime and the implications of that. So I strongly encourage all of you interested in Bitcoin and the future and of money and how it relates to what's going on in El Salvador to give Alex Alex's essay a read. I retweeted it this morning, so please check it out. A couple of shout outs I have to give you. I'm gonna go over here. So a couple of weeks ago, actually about a month ago, I think it was, my friend Anthony Pompliano, you all know him as Pomp, sent me a text and said, "Hey Bill, I want to send you some shoes." I said, "Okay, is there something wrong with the shoes that I have?" And he says, "No, I'm going to send you some Bitcoin shoes." I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of Bitcoin shoes." So anyway, so he sends you this link. And last week I don't know if you can see this, I get these shoes in the mail, and they're Bitcoin shoes. And they're from this company, I'm going to bring up the site here, called Adams. I got to give them a shout out. And this is related to Alex's article that I just talked about. That's my segue. So these Bitcoin shoes, and I have them here. I've been wearing them for a couple of days. They're actually amazingly comfortable. They're a way to raise money for the Human Rights Foundation, which is also supporting Bitcoin development, ironically enough. And that is the organization that Alex Gladstein, who many of you know, works for. And so if you want to support HRF and what they're doing, go check that out. So the other shill I want to do is I've been getting a lot of stuff from my friend Andreas Antonopoulos. My favorite giveaway, I don't know if you can see this on my weird background, but the Internet of Money is one of my favorite giveaways. I've probably sent via Amazon, I don't know, 40, 50 copies of the book over the last few years. And if you don't have it, just definitely check out the Internet of Money. And thank you, Andreas, for the kind gifts. I'm a happy supporter of Andreas's on Patreon, so you should check him out there as well. Oh, I got to show you this. So somebody sent me this yesterday, apparently, and I just spaced on the country. I'm going to bring up the screen share again. Maybe one of you can remind me which country, but apparently a new statue, let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Apparently there is a Satoshi Nakamoto statue. Let me see if I can figure out which country this is in. No, it just disappeared. I can't, yeah, I just lost it. All right, so hopefully you saw that statue for a minute. It's unbelievable. They literally, in this town square in an Eastern European city, unveiled a Satoshi Nakamoto statue. And if you could see how it was the stonework, it makes me work. It was pretty impressive. So I suspect we're going to see more of that over time. All right, so let's see. All right, so let me get to our guest and introduce you to Dan Morehead, who is the founder, co-chief investment officer, chief executive, I don't know if I get the title right, at Pantera. Dan was one of our first and earliest investors in Abra, and to my knowledge was one of the first kind of macro investors to focus on Bitcoin at all. So welcome, Dan, to Money Talks.
Thanks for having me, and congrats on the Series C. It's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was great to see you in New York. We were at the Digital Asset Summit this week, which was really well attended. A little bit of a hassle going on with everybody having to show vaccine cards and whatnot, which is kind of unique to New York City right now. But they pulled it off, and it was a lot of fun. It was great to get to see everyone in person.
Yeah, it's a really fun energy.
So I do want to talk about Pantera, but since I just talked about Digital Asset Summit, I want to talk about something that you were talking about. I caught part of your panel with Mark Yusko and Dan Tapiero from 10T, and you guys were talking about Ray Dalio's comments as they related to Bitcoin, and he talks about the fact that he owns Bitcoin now, and also at the same time said if it becomes too big, the government would kill it. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's a extremely unlikely outcome. Obviously, you can't say impossible. And to my mind, it's kind of reactionary to think that governments hate Bitcoin. That used to be a very common view. It's fading, thankfully. But the truth is, Bitcoin and other blockchains, really are pretty wonderful for citizens and even for governments. And specifically Bitcoin itself, there used to be that whole kind of meme that, Bitcoin's used for crime and, all that. I mean, it has a permanent paper trail of every transaction that's ever happened, and that's published publicly every 10 minutes. That is a terrible feature for committing crime. So, governments, are generally positive on blockchain. And then the same thing, for fiscal tax collection. A lot of countries have struggled to collect the appropriate amount of tax from their citizens, so they have to have very high rates and then very low, compliance, and in net's a huge mess. If the entire world were run on a blockchain, it'd be much more efficient and fair. So, I think that the reality is most governments are embracing blockchain, and then these days it's actually a strategic issue. Nations like China are building blockchains that are outside the U.S. sanctions regime, and so it's a geopolitical issue. And whether bureaucrats like blockchain or not, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and it's really.
So I want to come back to China in a minute. So I want to rewind now. So I agree with you on the Ray Dalio comments. I kind of liken it to BitTorrent. The ship has sailed. There's no off switch. But let's rewind for a second. So as I said, I think according to my understanding, you were one of the first, if not like really the first kind of people I would consider major macro investor to really go all in on Bitcoin and ultimately, now what we call cryptocurrencies. But what was your first exposure to Bitcoin, and what got you there so quickly relative to everyone else?
Yeah, so my brother introduced me to Bitcoin in 2011, and that was back when Gavin Andreessen, who subsequently became the chief scientist of Bitcoin, had a thing called the Bitcoin Faucet, giving away free Bitcoin. It really is amazing how the world's changed. There were so few people using it. All you had to do is sign up on bitcoinfaucet.com and you would get free Bitcoin. So my brother talked to me about it. I have a little bit of a libertarian streak, so I was like, this is awesome. I really hope it happens. But I didn't do anything. And then about 18 months later.
Did you use the faucet? Did you actually get some?
Yeah, so I got, like it was like a half a Bitcoin. It was, and in those days that was totally worthless, but obviously it's got some value now. So it didn't really do anything about it until 2013. Pete Berger of Fortress and Mike Novogratz called to talk about Bitcoin. And I went in for a coffee and stayed for like 5 hours. I was just like, oh man, this thing is going to be huge. And it took maybe another 6 months or so to really kind of get my head around it. But I spent exclusively focused on Bitcoin. And we did actually launch the first cryptocurrency fund in the United States and the first blockchain venture fund. And I'm as excited about it today as I was then. I think it's going to completely revolutionize the world. And I actually think it's going to provide an enormous positive benefit for billions of people.
Yeah. Do you remember back then? I mean, it's several years now, but what was it that, really resonated with you once you started doing all this digging that you talked about? Yeah.
So my career before that was in global macro style investing at Tiger Management and Pantera, looking for very asymmetric trades, like Russian privatization or Argentine farmland or Tesla Motors, things where the upside's just so much bigger than the downside. And that's really what I saw here, is a trade where obviously it's very speculative. At the time, I actually thought it really could go to zero, like the whole thing could just break and not work. But that if it even did a small fraction of what I thought it might be able to do, you might be able to make 10 times your money or 100 times your money, or our first fund's up 600 times, just numbers you just can't achieve in any other asset class. And I was formerly trading a global macro hedge fund. And, if you're eking out, 10, 12% a year, you think you're a hero. And these days, 10-year treasuries are 1.3, right? So you'd have to hold treasuries for 40 years to make Bitcoin's year-to-date return, right? It's such a different trade. That's what got me going.
Yeah. And your money's actually losing value while you're getting the 1.4% at the same time. So, So tell me now about Pantera. How do you I'm a Wall Street Journal writer, and you're giving me the overview of Pantera as a newbie. Give us the Pantera story.
Yeah. So, we originally launched just one product, a Bitcoin fund, which allows institutions and individuals to get access to Bitcoin. It's still pretty relevant because there's no ETF 8 years later. But back in 2013, when 85% of the market was going through Mt. Gox, it was a very good vehicle because we never traded with Mt. Gox. and always, custodied in a much safer way and all that. So we started out with one product. We now have 4 funds that cover the spectrum from that daily liquidity Bitcoin fund. We have a fund in 2013, we did our first venture fund, all blockchain companies. We're now doing our 4th venture style fund where we're investing in companies in the space like Abra, which was one of our first investments. And it's been a fun ride. And then we have 2 hedge funds, one of which trades liquid tokens like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then the other one invests in those types of tokens prior to them becoming public. It's called our early stage token fund, and it invests in tokens typically several years before they become public.
Yep, got it. How much are you all managing all in across all of the funds now?
So we manage $5.5 billion, and we actually returned about that much to investors over the years as well.
Wow. So that doesn't even include potential gains from what you would have had if people hadn't, even taken money out, I suppose. It would be phenomenal. That's incredible. What a story. And how would you encapsulate your investment thesis for crypto today and where you think it's going over the next couple of 2 years, 5 years?
Yeah, so it evolves. And as I said, in the early days, I was 100% Bitcoin. And that was, for a long time, that was really a good proxy for our industry. And then you really need to have Bitcoin and ETH to kind of have a good, proxy for the crypto industry. What I've been saying for about a year is, unfortunately, that's not enough anymore. There are so many other important protocols that you really do need to have exposure to. And I was just speaking at SALT conference in New York, and I said something that really kind of aggravated my close friends who are Bitcoin maximalists. But my professional opinion is the majority of the gains going forward will be in things other than Bitcoin. And it's not to say Bitcoin's not going to go up 10x. I think Bitcoin is going to go up 10x, and it's going to be an awesome trade. So if your investment committee will only allow either being long Bitcoin or crypto, definitely buy Bitcoin. It's awesome. It's going to go up a ton. But if you're allowed to diversify and buy other protocols, I think you should. And to my mind, it's like in the late 90s saying the majority of tech gains going forward would not be Microsoft. Microsoft went up 10x since 1998, right? So it was an awesome trade. Like, being long Microsoft was great. But at the time, in 1998, Microsoft was worth $260 billion. Amazon was worth $10 billion. And Apple, $1 billion.
Wow.
And Google and Facebook, zero.
1 billion?
Yeah.
At that time? That is unbelievable.
So since then, Microsoft did go up 10x, but is now, it used to be 98% of the value of those companies, and now it's 20%, right? And so I think that's what our industry is seeing. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of cool projects, Polkadot, Solana, that could end up being the larger part of the gains. And we've actually seen that in the last 6 months. More than 100% of the gains have come from tokens outside of Bitcoin.
How do you decide what tokens matter from a macro perspective? I mean, is it just, hey, we're just going to have a big basket and have enough in there that it'll be a rising tide? Or are there very specific bets that map back to kind of usage theses that you have within the broader kind of crypto ecosystem?
No, I think there are some very specific bets you can make. And one of the reasons I love this asset class is there's still a ton of alpha in it. In kind of the normal markets, there's so many big hedge funds with so many really bright people all staring at the same stocks. It's hard to have an edge. Whereas in the blockchain industry, there's not that many firms out there, and we have 60 people, so we're probably one of the biggest, but still that's pretty small compared to all these massive investors in the normal markets. And so with that, you can analyze the different blockchains and make bets. And we typically have about 12 positions in our portfolio, so it's certainly not a index weighted portfolio. And you can pull a lot of alpha out of the markets. And an example would be, so far this year, Bitcoin's up 64%. and our liquid token hedge fund is up 384%. So, there's 320 percentage points of alpha from picking, which tokens to be in at the appropriate time.
It's interesting that the space would measure alpha versus Bitcoin now, which is an asset that didn't exist 11 years ago, right?
No, it is great.
How fast and how far the space has come in this time frame. How are you all looking at kind of the killer apps in this kind of decentralized application model, right? Everybody's all about DeFi and NFTs right now. And how are you all looking at that, and how does that affect your investment thesis?
Sure. So I'm our whole firm is a big believer in DeFi. And the way to think about it is, all the protocols that we now call the internet radically changed almost everything else in our lives, but they really didn't touch finance. Banks are basically the way they were when the Medici set them up, and Visa, MasterCard's been charging the same rate since 1958, and Western Union's been the same for 140 years. So that's what DeFi is. It's ways to connect borrowers with lenders without a expensive financial intermediary. It's connecting people that want to sell an asset with somebody who wants to buy an asset, doing all those things. Excuse me. And we're all excited because the DeFi space has grown to be $100 billion, which is awesome because it was tiny, 18 months ago. But the bond market's $100 trillion, right? So we're 1,000x away from where we could ultimately go. And so I think DeFi, in our opinion, DeFi is kind of the next big thing.
Yeah. And do you have an opinion on like the path? Are there certain, obviously right now it's mostly yield, right? And the hunt for yield. And what comes next? Like what aspects of banking that do you think will map to DeFi next beyond simply yield, which is huge, but obviously just as you said, one piece of the overall banking pie that DeFi can encapsulate?
Yeah, so the other big leg right now is decentralized exchanges. So, projects like Uniswap and OneEdge that are allowing people that want to sell an asset to match up with people that want to buy an asset. And there again, it's replacing these very expensive exchanges that have been around since a couple people got together under a buttonwood tree in Lower Manhattan and ultimately founded the New York Stock Exchange. So those are the two main applications. The other thing we're excited about is, this whole concept of Web 3.0, where you're taking really cool ideas like Airbnb or Spotify, but you're doing a decentralized version of them, where the content creators are getting a much higher fraction of the value of the products they're building, and then the consumer gets, a better experience.
Yeah. So your comment about the two guys under the tree is interesting, because one of the things that I think is going to be interesting with DeFi is DeFi has no borders, and the protocols, maybe the websites have an off switch, but the protocols themselves have no off switch. So you don't have two guys under a tree anymore that you can either regulate or arrest or fine or whatever. But the protocols themselves can, in theory, enable trading in stocks, bonds, highly regulated asset classes in a model where there's no real clear regulatory regime because there's no owner and there's no off switch. How do you think that's going to play out? I mean, when you have a borderless kind of always on system, is regulation even tenable at that point?
A fascinating question, and regulators are grappling with that. In the United States, our regulatory system was set up to prevent the Great Depression from happening again. Distributed ledger technology is a super head-spinning new concept that is frankly kind of hard to fit in to the existing regulatory landscape. My hope is that governments globally will let all this innovation grow, mature, play out a bit, before and then craft regulatory regimes that work with this new innovation. And luckily, most countries have done that. Most countries have allowed the blockchain industry to grow and thrive. And there's been a few countries that have been very progressive, but most countries have been laissez-faire. And the United States as well, has let most of this innovation grow. And that's my hope, is that we can, have a bunch more years to develop within, the United States rather than outside it.
So I'm guessing I'm sure you speak every day to people who are either new to crypto, trying to figure out if they should make an allocation into the cryptocurrency space, or have these regulatory questions or other concerns before they go put a toe in the water, or even all in, or somewhere in between. What is do you have a standard kind of spiel pitch message to that potential newbie who is just not there yet, and you think you can get them over the hump? Is there kind of a pitch that you normally give them?
It's a fun question, because I have given this pitch a lot of times in 8 years, and different things click with different people. It has been fascinating. There are sometimes gold bugs totally get the debasement of the US dollar, but the kind of go-to way I try and describe it is going back to the protocols that I was mentioning before, that I think blockchain is the final piece of the protocol puzzle that is the internet. So we have all these other protocols, and TCP/IP is now almost 50 years old, that came together and changed everything else. And even in the 90s, Milton Friedman said the only thing missing from the internet was an e-cash system. And that's basically what Bitcoin and other blockchains are. And that normally gets people to get their head around it. The other concept that I like is to use the telephone industry analog. And when I was in college, AT&T controlled every phone in the United States. And if I want to call somebody in England, British Telecom was the only way to do it. And it was really expensive. I mean, people were very focused on how expensive international phone calling was. But we discovered you could route voice over IP, and the amount of data that now goes over fiber optic is literally more than we have enough copper on Earth if the world were still on copper wires. So, and it's basically free, bandwidth is free. And that's what I think an analog for blockchains is, basically money over IP. And you're going to be able to send money, like with Abra, to anyone, anywhere on Earth, essentially free, essentially real time, right? It's going to radically change a lot of things. And just like, VoIP changed things that we couldn't even imagine, there's going to be, micro labor and all kinds of really cool things that we can kind of squint and see happening. But over the next 20 years, it's going to be amazing what will be done with blockchain. And then the last kind of go-to pitch is to make the case that alts, alternative investments really aren't alternative anymore. Basically, everybody has the same portfolio. And blockchain is a way to get something that's had a staggering return. The 11-year compound annual growth rate of Bitcoin is 233%. It's had some bubbles, it's had some bursts, but pretty much every year it grinds out tripling. So if you can find an asset like that also has zero correlation to other asset classes, which Bitcoin historically does, that is the dream asset. Like, you can't get a higher return anywhere else, and almost everything else is correlated. So that normally helps, big institutions decide to, put 50 basis points or % of their assets into crypto.
So on the last point, so Willy Woo was making a comment a few weeks ago that I read, where he said that the halving cycles we've had so far may not play out the same way according to his models going forward, meaning we may not have the troughs that we had before, just given the on-chain metrics that he's seeing. Do you all look at stuff like that, or is it just, hey, we're in this for the long term, and we just ride it out and hold it for dear life?
Oh, we do, and I do believe that the 4-year halving cycle is very important. And in our investor letter in April 2020, we did take a look at the previous 2 halvings and projected the impact onto this next halving. And obviously, each halving is half as big as the previous one, and then there's more stock of Bitcoin out there. So they're about a third the impact of the previous one. And so we projected out where the price of Bitcoin would go. It was at 8,000 at the time. And we put, for the middle of each month going forward for 18 months, where the price of Bitcoin would go. And in April of this year, we had predicted that it hit $62,698, and it did on the day it was predicted. So the cycles do repeat, but again, they get a third as big each time. So the next halving will probably have a much third as big impact as the
So where
previous
does that model have us now at the end of the year?
Yeah, so the price of Bitcoin should hit 115,000 this year. And I still think it will. I mean, I think we had that crazy. So part of the comment is, whether the bear markets will be as big as they were. The first 4 bear markets that we have been in averaged 83%. Right. And then the last 2 years, we've had 55% bear markets in May this year and March last year. And so I do think we're attenuating. The bull cycles will be a bit less and the bear cycles a bit less. And it's partly because, our industry is just much more deep and institutional than it was, when you and I first met. Like in bear markets, you didn't know if it was ever going to come back. You think, oh man,
zero was an option, right?
Yeah, zero is a very, very possible option. And so I think, 12 years in, the cycles are going to be muted, and then 20 years from now, they'll be even less volatile.
Yeah. So, okay, I got to ask you. So, put you on the spot. 3 cryptos everyone should hold that aren't Bitcoin.
I think, I would say, well, Ethereum, definitely. We're also a big believer in Polkadot. And then, I would go for a decentralized exchange, like 1inch. That kind of gives you a Ethereum and Ethereum competitor, and then a DeFi type thing in one package.
Great list. So NFTs, we didn't talk about NFTs when we talked about Web3 before. What's your guys' take on NFTs? Is this a blip? Is it a craze? Is it going to change the world? What's your take?
It's all those things. Yeah. So it's like any new, very disruptive, creative thing. There is a lot of hype, and a lot of things are going to go to zero, but then some really important stuff will come out of it. And it's like the .com boom, it's like the ICO boom in 2017. That the punchline is, we're definitely believers something big is happening here, and we're big investors in companies like Maker's Place that are providing the infrastructure for NFTs. And the one kind of caution, I would make is, if when buying NFTs, you want to make sure it's something that actually needs to be done in a blockchain tokenized digital way, and it's not just like a LeBron 3-pointer on an NFT, right? So it's kind of like the early days of Bitcoin. There was a fun website that was called butwithbitcoin.com, and had a random generator that would pick a business line, but with Bitcoin every day. And it is kind of funny. So like, if you're just doing something that can be done in the real world, like a DJ's playlist, and it's an NFT, I'm not entirely sure that's going to last, But if it's some piece of art or content that evolves in kind of relation to what the fans interact with it, or something, those kinds of art are very important. And you can think of it, like it is a new type of art. And, for the critics out there, I'd use examples like Marcel Duchamp put a urinal on a wall, and 100 years later, it's worth $150 million, right? And it's just a porcelain urinal. And Jackson Pollock got some house paint and splattered it on some canvas, and it's also worth $150 million. So there will be things like that coming out.
I know what I'll be doing this afternoon, by the way.
Yeah. So it's definitely important, but there's definitely a lot of hype.
Yeah. Okay. Have you purchased personally any NFT kind of art yet?
I have one NFT piece of art, and so I think there are some important things, but there is also a lot of hype.
Did your team get in on any of these mutant apes that were all the rage, or I guess now with the Sotheby's auction are still going on?
Oh, I'm not sure who's what our team's done. If anyone's, we definitely haven't done it for the fun.
Yeah. Do you think that there's going to be a demand for that, where funds will actually invest in NFTs?
Yeah,
but specifically the objects themselves.
Yeah, no, it's we've seen this movie before, and so our industry's replicating all the stuff we have in the normal world, and so I'm sure there are going to be art funds or NFT funds that raise money, and there actually are a couple funds that I'm aware of already that are buying them as speculative assets. And, that's what's fun about this industry. It's just, it's always evolving, and there's so many ways to get engaged.
Yep. Okay. So you said Bitcoin 115K. You mentioned ETH.1inch. I own all three. ETH end of year, thoughts there?
Yeah. So, I think it's probably going to double in, the next 4 months, so that kind of perspective, 7,000, something like that.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good. Works for me. All right. Dan Morehead, founder, co-chief investment officer at Pantera, early investor in Abra. You've been a great friend for many years. We thank you for the everlasting support. You guys have been amazing, and look forward to the next 3 years. It's going to be amazing.
Hey, thanks so much. And again, congrats on the round.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. All right. Thanks to Dan. And I've got an announcement on next week's guest. You're going to love this one. All right. So you're going to have to wait a couple of minutes for this announcement, but I promise you're going to love it. Thank you, Dan. That was amazing. And I think this interview is going to get a lot of playback on the interwebs. So thanks for that. A couple of Abra announcements that I think you're going to like. First of all, many of you were very unhappy when we were forced to delist Zcash and Dash. I am happy to say that both are back in the Abra app. So those of you who use, let me just bring up my app here, you can see Zcash and Dash, you will now find them in the Abra app. So that's great news. Just go into the Abra app. If you update the app to the latest version, you can scroll down here and you'll see that I've got, there it is at the bottom, Zcash, and you can see the price charts back. All my historical trades from last year and a couple of years ago are still there. So super excited there. Dash is back as well. Just a reminder before I get to some questions that we also have 2FA turned on in the app now. If you haven't turned it on, please turn on two-factor authentication, okay? If you don't know how to do it, I'll show you really quick. You go into the menu in the upper left corner. You see about 5 rows down where it says Wallet Security. Click on that, and two-factor authentication. What two-factor authentication does, and you'll often hear it referred to as 2FA, it means that anytime you try to withdraw money from the app, you'll have to use a third-party authentication app like Google Authenticator or Authy or Microsoft's Authenticator to validate the transaction, so that if somebody steals your phone, they won't be able to do it without the 2FA code. And so you've probably seen the 2FA code in other apps. Facebook uses it, Twitter uses it now, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so please set up 2FA so that people who steal your Abra app can't withdraw funds from your device. Okay. Somebody asked, what was the DeFi crypto that Dan just mentioned as his third recommendation? That was 1inch, and 1inch is a kind of an aggregator of different dexes, from what I understand. But I've tried it, I like it, and I also am a holder of 1inch as well. Okay, so let me see if we've got some other questions here. Yeah. People are really liking the Dan interview. I'm seeing a ton of, yeah, that's right. Dan was on the Real Vision crypto gathering earlier this morning. I caught a little bit of that. Dan's great. I saw him and Dan Tapiero and from 10T, who I'd love to get on the show at one point, along with Mark Yusko, who we've interviewed before, all on stage at the same time. So it was kind of a macro goat session. All right. Let's see. If parents invest in crypto, they will be able to fund their children's university tuition at Ivy League schools. Totally agree with that. We'll see, but yeah. All right. So seeing a lot of gratitude here for Dan. And I wanted to just kind of give an update on what's happening with Abra Earn. So I'll go over here to the Abra Earn demo screen. You can see where the rates are. Currently paying out 8% on US dollars, 4.5% on ETH, 3.15% on Bitcoin, and Lumens is paying and holding steady at 4%. So, we've spent a lot of time over the last few months, actually over the last year, talking about how we generate yield at Abra. There's a ton of videos online where you hear me talking about this. There's specifically a section on our website talking about yield, linking to videos on how we do it. There's a video right at the top of our YouTube channel that talks about how we generate yield. Yeah, so I'm happy to continue to answer questions about that. So somebody asked about reserves. So yes, Abra maintains very significant reserves. We don't actually lend all of the funds deposited into Abra Earn. That's how we're able to pay withdrawals, and there's really no chance for a run on Abra accounts like they say in traditional banking. So yes, we've covered this many times in the past, but it's totally fine. Feel free to ask away. That's why we're here. And so somebody was asking, yes, you can use your Bitcoin as collateral to get a USDC loan. And you click at the bottom of the screen on Abra Borrow. And if you're in a jurisdiction, a state, I think we're up to 43 or 44 states now in the US where you can borrow against Bitcoin and via USDC, and like 50 countries. And so when you click on Abra Borrow, if it's allowed in your jurisdiction, you'll be able to initiate the loan. You simply deposit the Bitcoin collateral. You can move it over from Abra Earn if it's already in there, or deposit it from an external wallet, and you'll immediately get the USDC into your Abra wallet, okay? All right, so that's how that works. All right, so let me talk about, let's see, I've got my list. Yeah, next week's guest. Okay, so this is something I've been working on for a long time. He and I have spoken several times one-on-one. We met one-on-one a few times just to kind of, get to know each other a little bit first and make sure that, this was going to go well. But I'm thrilled and excited to announce that Michael Saylor is going to be joining us next week on Money Talks as our special guest. So we'll be announcing that far and wide early next week, but you're all the first to hear and know that Michael Saylor and I will be doing a one-on-one here on Money Talks next Friday. So yeah, really excited about that. It's been a long time coming. Mike's a great guy. Obviously, he's one of the most prolific people in our ecosystem. His company is the largest corporate holder of Bitcoin, institutional holder of Bitcoin. I think they're up to like 4 or 5 billion now. Yeah, so really excited to get into it with Michael. We talk about how how the dollar as an inflationary asset is going to interoperate with Bitcoin as a deflationary asset over time, and how people should think about Bitcoin. I'll push Michael on Bitcoin versus other cryptocurrencies. Obviously, Dan from Pantera has a very different perspective on the whole kind of broader crypto ecosystem, whereas Michael's very much all in on Bitcoin. So that will be a really interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to it. And then we're not going to stop there. The week after that, we've got an unbelievable announcement for you. So the next like 3 weeks or so at Abra are going to be insane. I'm thrilled that you're all along for the ride. Yeah, so keep the questions coming. I'm already seeing a lot of thumbs up for Michael Saylor. A lot more gratitude for Dan, so that's great. Let's see. Yeah. So so people are asking, why we're able to generate these interest rates when rates on other services are much lower. Well, in some cases, they're keeping a much higher percentage of the yield, right? So Abra is profitable, but we let you have the majority of any interest earned on your deposits. It's as simple as that. We have fantastic risk management processes, but at the same time, you're keeping the majority of what you earn on those deposits. And I'm not aware that our let's call them competitors or friends in the space are doing the same thing. So that's why, I keep all of my liquid crypto in Abra Earn. Okay. Somebody asked about Lightning support. I get this every week. Yeah, so we will at some point, I'm sure, be adding Lightning support to Abra. I don't know when yet. I think it's still very early. I've been paying really close attention to what is happening in El Salvador, and when the time is right, I'm sure Abra will be supporting Lightning. Somebody was asking about Cardano in Abra Earn. So I have to apologize. I've been promising this for a couple of weeks. It is in testing. We've been finalizing some glitches just to make sure everything works perfectly when we launch it to all of you. And I was told before the show that we're targeting at some point early next week, but we're not going to release it until it's working flawlessly. And then we will release it. But I assure you, it's being worked on. Sorry about that. Let me bring up my screen share. Actually, I'm going to turn this off. Turn off the screen share here. All right. So that's Cardano. Let's see what else. Yes, our savior, Michael Saylor. I don't know about that, but he's certainly very entertaining, super interesting, and absolutely brilliant. I've never seen somebody, have such a quick wit and so many one-liners. So, and Joe says Abra needs a referral program. Joe, I completely agree. As I mentioned, it's going to be a really fun 3 weeks for Abra, and definitely want to stay tuned for what's going on. I'm not going to say more than that. Abra should put together a Pantera token. That's interesting. I'm pretty sure that would be a security, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. Interesting idea. All right, so Time Turn says Saylor is so focused. I totally agree. He's unbelievably focused, and he's just absolutely brilliant. I'm really excited. So I want you guys to start teeing up questions, and when we put it up on the Twitter feed, you got to give us feedback. So so that we know what is on your mind, so that we can relay that to Michael in our discussion next week. Sam asks, is Abra going to list Solana? I hope so. So just keep in mind, it's not always up to Abra what we list. We provide feedback to our liquidity trading partners and custody partners, and they need to support anything we list. And I hope I'm big fan of the Solana project. I would definitely be holding some in Abra if and when we list it. I suspect it will be there at some point. They've had some tech issues this week, right? I mean, they had a rough week. The actual blockchain, from my understanding, I don't want to say offline. Maybe that's the wrong word, but yeah, they were not processing transactions for some time. And look, every new crypto project has gone through that. What's different here is that Solana, the valuation is simply through the roof. No project has gone through these tech issues with a valuation that high. And that's obviously put them in the public eye. I mean, CNBC was talking about the fact that Solana was having an outage. That's just unheard of in our space, right? So that tells you how far we've come, but also the expectations are crazy high. Timothy says Dash or Zcash. Any thoughts on which ones I think is a better investment? So Timothy, I don't use Zcash or Dash as investments. I use them to send money. And honestly, it's often dependent upon what the other party wants to receive. I use Zcash, Dash, Monero on occasion for sending money. We don't support Monero right now in the US, but hopefully we will soon again. But yeah, I don't have an opinion on investing in them. I tend to use them more for P2P transactions. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and I just want to remind you all, when we give these price forecasts, Dan says Bitcoin 115,000, I say Ethereum 15,000. We're not here to tell you what to buy. We're giving you our personal opinions. This isn't investment advice. Please do your homework. Make important investment decisions for yourself, inform yourself, get educated, invest what you're willing to lose, spread the money around. If you don't go deep, then it's better to diversify. Okay, and that's my feeling on investing anyway. Okay. So a lot of you have had support questions for the support team. They're here answering the questions. You can also take it to them directly via the app. If you go into the app and click on Contact Us, the same exact support team will be answering your question, usually in a few minutes during the week and maybe in an hour or two on the weekend. But the response times right now are fantastic. When are we coming out with a credit card, maybe with Amex? So Jim, we don't have anything to announce on that front, except to say, I would love to have an Abra card, and just please watch Money Talks over the next 3 weeks. I'm telling you, it is going to be awesome. Between the guests, the product announcements, the marketing announcements, we've never done anything like what you're going to see over the next few weeks, and I've never been more excited for anything that I've worked on in the crypto space before. So this is going to be super cool. So please do check it out. IRAs. So Alan was asking if we have any plans for an IRA. We've looked at it. It's definitely something we're interested in. The challenge there is it's also very US specific, and obviously we have customers all over the world. But I do think that that an IRA product for Americans would be super cool. I might actually use that myself. Probably would be more interested in a trust model, but that's something that we do already support today. We do support self-directed trusts via our business accounts. And so if you are investing into crypto and want to invest via trust, you can do that with Abra. Just contact our support team and tell them you need a business account, and they'll be even if it's a personal trust, we can do it, and they'll be in touch with you. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So if you go to somebody was asking about jobs, where we have Abra's job listings. We have a ton of job openings right now. If you go to abra.com and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see all of the job listings that are public. We often have some that aren't public for security reasons. So feel free to always to send your resume to jobs@abra.com. It'll get routed to the right place. And if you go on LinkedIn and click on or search for Abra, you'll see job postings there as well. So generally they're all over the place. So pretty easy to find if you go look. Okay. Let's see what else. So yeah, again, contacting support, the fastest way to get a response is the Contact Us button inside the Abra app main menu. Just go there and you'll get a response. Like I said, the response times, I look at the response times, I see them pretty much every week, and they're certainly less than an hour in almost every instance for new requests. And if for whatever reason you fall through the cracks, which is very rare, you don't get a response, just send a second response. And generally the two will get combined and you'll get a response right away. Okay. All right. So my voice is tired, all that talking. It's moving day for me. So the set will look the same next week, but I'll be doing it from a new location. So I'm going to call it there. Yeah, so keep the requests coming, keep the questions coming. Super excited about Michael Saylor for next week. And yeah, we'll see you then with Michael. So in the meantime, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week on Money Talks. Thanks, everyone.